All right, so today we're diving into U.S.-China relations, specifically how big tech is changing the whole global power dynamic. We've got this really interesting article from Foreign Policy. It really gets into how the U.S. and China are going in completely opposite directions when it comes to these tech giants.
Yeah.
And what that means for all of us, for the future. It's pretty thought-provoking stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of wild how different their approaches are. Almost like they're mirror images of each other when it comes to big tech. Like, to really understand how we got here, I think it helps to start with Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba.
Oh, yeah. His story it's crazy. He was like the poster child for China's economic miracle, right? Build Alibaba into this massive e-commerce empire. I mean, bigger than Amazon in China even.
Yeah.
Went from teaching English to hanging out with world leaders.
Yeah, he was everywhere. Even bought the South China Morning Post, one of the biggest English language newspapers in Asia, really expanded his global reach. But then, and this is the wild part, he just vanished. After Alibaba got in some trouble with the Chinese government.
It's like a spy movie or something. 1 minute he's on top of the world, next minute, poof, gone.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, a lot of people think it was a message from the Chinese Communist Party, and Xi Jinping specifically, basically saying, we're in control here.
Don't even think about challenging the party kind of thing.
Exactly. And this wasn't just some isolated incident. It was part of this bigger crackdown on the whole Chinese tech sector.
So they were worried about these companies getting too powerful.
I think so. They recognized early on how disruptive big tech could be to their control over information, the economy, even social stability.
Interesting. Because you got to admit, even if their methods aren't exactly democratic, they were kind of ahead of the curve on that one, recognizing the potential for big tech to shake things up.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, contrast that with the U.S. approach, especially under Trump. Yeah. It felt like there was this blind faith in big tech and their leaders, guys like Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, remember that meeting Trump had with Larry Ellison, Masayoshi Son, and Sam Altman to launch that Stargate AI project. It felt like they were just celebrating wealth and tech, not really thinking about the implications of this powerful technology.
And Trump's understanding of AI always seemed a little simplistic, maybe?
A bit, yeah. He seemed to see it as a magic solution to everything.
Yeah, like a silver bullet.
Exactly. And his administration's, hands-off approach to regulation didn't help.
Basically letting these companies write their own rules.
Pretty much.
Which brings us to Elon Musk. He became this almost mythical figure during the Trump era, blurring the lines between business and government.
Right. He was appointed to head that Department of Government Efficiency thing, DOGE. The idea was to use, Musk's expertise to make the government more efficient.
Yeah. Using technology, right.
Yeah, but it raised a lot of questions about conflicts of interest.
Because on one hand, you have him pushing his own, ambitious projects, like colonizing Mars, presenting it as a national priority almost.
And then on the other hand, he's publicly criticizing other AI projects like that Stargate thing. Makes you wonder if he's just, trying to protect his own interests.
So we've got these two totally different approaches. China cracking down, the U.S. getting more and more entangled with big tech. Makes you wonder who's really calling the shots.
Right.
It does. It's like two different experiments, each with their own, risks and rewards.
Yeah, and the implications are huge. This isn't just about technology. It's about the future of society, the balance of power, even democracy itself.
Okay, so we've laid out these two approaches, but let's bring it down to earth a bit. What does this all mean for the average person? How could these different approaches actually play out in our lives?
Well, think about China. They're using technology to build this highly controlled society.
Right, with all the facial recognition.
Yeah, they're using it for surveillance, censoring online content, even tracking people's behavior with algorithms and social credit scores.
It's like that episode of Black Mirror where everyone's rating each other all the time, except it's the government doing the rating. Kind of creepy.
Yeah, it is. Big concerns about privacy and freedom there. Now, in the U.S., at least on the surface, the focus is still on individual liberty, free markets.
But big tech is getting more and more powerful.
Exactly, and that raises a different set of concerns.
Like what?
Well, think about the power they have over our data, our online experiences, even our politics.
They're tracking everything we do online, right?
They are.
And targeting us with ads and stuff.
Yep. They can even influence what information we see.
Which is, that's a little unsettling. when you think about it.
It is, especially as they become more intertwined with the government.
So it's kind of a trade-off. More control in exchange for security and stability, or more freedom with the risk of, corporate influence and data being used against us.
Right. And it's hard to say which path is better in the long run.
It really is.
It's something we as citizens need to be aware of and engaged in, because these choices have huge implications for the world of tomorrow.
Absolutely. We'll dig more into that in a bit. But first, let's take a quick break.
Yeah, it's a question we all need to be thinking about.
So let's talk about data privacy. Everyone's worried about that these days. How is China handling that?
Well, basically, the government has total access to people's data.
Really?
Yeah, they've got this social credit system, tracks everything you do, online behavior, financial stuff, even if you, jaywalk. And then they use all that data to give you a score.
A score?
Yeah, and that score can affect, everything, getting loans, travel permits, even jobs.
Wow, that's pretty intense. What about the U.S.? Don't we have, laws to protect our data?
We do, HIPAA for health information, FERPA for student data, but it's more of a patchwork system, different rules for different industries.
And are those laws, strong enough to keep up with all the data collection that big tech is doing?
That's the big question. It seems like every other week there's another scandal, right?
Yeah, it's hard to even keep track.
So the key difference is, in China, data privacy basically doesn't exist. The government sees data as a tool for control, for social engineering. In the US, at least there's an attempt to balance things out. Individual privacy versus, the needs of businesses and national security.
Two completely different philosophies, huh?
Yeah, and those differences extend to other areas too. Think about antitrust regulations.
Right.
In the US, we've got a long history of using those to break up monopolies, promote competition, like with Standard Oil way back when. Or more recently, with people talking about regulating Google and Facebook.
So the idea is to prevent any one company from getting too big?
Right, and to prevent them from, abusing their power. Now, China's taken a much more hands-off approach. They've let their tech companies become these massive conglomerates.
They've almost created these national champions.
Yeah, they see them as assets in their quest for global influence.
Which brings us to AI. Both countries are pouring money into it.
Oh, yeah.
But with very different goals.
For sure. China is using AI to enhance their surveillance capabilities, automate manufacturing, even develop autonomous weapons.
They're really going all in on AI.
They are. They see it as essential for achieving their strategic goals.
And what about the U.S.?
Well, we see it as crucial for maintaining our technological edge, too, especially in areas like defense. But there's also a big focus on commercial applications. Companies like Google and Microsoft are leading the charge there.
So it's kind of a mixed bag for us.
It is.
But either way, AI is going to be huge.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about who develops the best AI. It's about how it's used, what values are embedded in it, who controls the narrative, even...
That's a good point. It's almost like a new kind of ideological battle. Not just about territory anymore, but about ideas.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about who has the best tech. It's about what kind of world we end up living in.
Okay, so we've talked about China and the U.S., but let's zoom out for a second. What about the rest of the world? How are these different approaches affecting everyone else?
Well, it's creating a lot of tension. Other countries are being forced to choose sides, U.S. or China. And that's leading to new alliances, new dividing lines. It's really reshaping global power dynamics.
Like a new Cold War almost.
There are definitely some parallels.
Yeah.
This competition, the mistrust, the risk of things escalating.
But it's different too, right?
Right. For one thing, there's no clear ideological divide like there was between, capitalism and communism. And the US and China are so economically intertwined. They're rivals, but they're also partners. It's a much more complex situation.
Yeah, it's like they're stuck with each other.
Exactly. And that makes things very unpredictable because unlike the Cold War, the US and China are deeply connected economically, technologically. Any serious conflict between them would be devastating.
For everyone.
For everyone.
So it's a balancing act, trying to manage this rivalry without letting it get out of control.
A very delicate balancing act.
And the stakes are getting higher and higher as technology keeps advancing.
That's for sure.
Which brings us back to the core of our deep dive. How do we manage this relationship between the US and China in a way that benefits both countries and the rest of the world?
It's the the million-dollar question, and there are no easy answers.
But at least understanding these different approaches to big tech, that's a good place to start.
It is, because how these two superpowers decide to use technology, that's going to have a huge impact on all of us.
Absolutely. Now, let's get specific. How are these different approaches playing out in certain sectors? Like, let's talk about AI. How's that being developed and regulated differently?
Okay, so AI, right? It's like the Wild West of tech. So much potential, but also a lot of risk. And as you might expect, China and the US are taking very different approaches.
No, so?
Well, China sees AI as a tool to achieve their national goals. Like, they're focusing on surveillance, automation, military applications.
They're not holding back, are they?
Nope. They're pouring tons of money into research, attracting top talent, and the regulations are designed to encourage rapid innovation, even if it means, maybe overlooking some ethical concerns.
That's pretty different from the US, right?
Yeah, we're much more cautious.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to regulation.
There's definitely more debate here about the ethics of AI.
Oh, yeah. Concerns about bias, the need for responsible development, and there's a growing push for more regulation to make sure AI is used for good and doesn't threaten human rights or democracy.
So it sounds like China's all about speed and efficiency, while the US is more focused on ethics and responsible innovation.
That's a good way to put it.
Makes you wonder who's going to win this AI race, though.
Yeah, it's a tough one to call.
Will China's aggressive approach give them an edge? Or will the U.S.'s focus on ethics be more sustainable in the long run?
It's a billion-dollar question, and we'll just have to wait and see.
But one thing's for sure, these choices that they're making today, they're going to have a huge impact on the future of AI.
Absolutely.
And that future is going to affect all of us.
Yeah, it's not just about the economy and jobs. It's about warfare, even the nature of society itself.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But it's important to think about.
Yeah, we need to be engaged.
So we've talked about AI, data privacy, antitrust regulations. It's clear these different approaches are playing out everywhere. But let's talk about the human element for a minute. How are these trends actually affecting people's lives in China and the US?
It's a good point, because it's easy to get lost in, the big picture stuff. But ultimately, it's all about how this affects people.
Yeah, so what are some of the key differences in how people are experiencing these changes?
Well, in China, it's the surveillance and control. The government's using technology to watch everything people do,
right?
Track their movements, their online activity, even score their behavior. And that creates a real chilling effect on free speech and dissent. People are constantly aware that they're being watched.
Like Big Brother's always watching.
Exactly. And while the U.S. doesn't have that level of government surveillance, there are concerns about big tech companies doing the same thing.
Yeah, it feels like we're being tracked all the time.
Yeah, they know everything we do online. Our shopping habits, our political views.
It's creepy.
It is, and the potential for abuse is huge.
Yeah.
This data can be used to manipulate us, to influence our decisions, even discriminate against us.
So even though we don't have that same level of government control, we've got our own set of challenges.
We do.
When it comes to privacy, data security, all of that.
Yeah, and it's important that we recognize that and have conversations about how to deal with it.
Okay, so we've talked about the downsides, but are there any potential benefits to all this? I mean, technology isn't inherently bad.
No, of course not. It has the potential to improve our lives in so many ways.
How so?
Well, it can connect us with people, give us access to information, even cure diseases.
Right.
And both China and the U.S. are using technology to boost their economies, create jobs, improve people's lives.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. But we have to be mindful of both sides of the coin, the potential benefits and the risks, and work to make sure technology is used for good.
Technology for good. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Especially as things change so fast.
It is.
Okay, we've covered a lot about China and the U.S.
We have.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on. And that's the role of individuals in all of this.
Ah, yes. The human element. It's easy to forget about that.
But we're not just, passive bystanders here.
We're not.
We have a voice. We can make choices.
We have the power to shape the future.
So what can people do to make a difference?
Well, first of all, we need to stay informed, understand the issues, have conversations about the implications of all this.
We can't just ignore it and hope for the best.
Nope. We need to be critical thinkers, Question assumptions, demand accountability, from our leaders, from these tech companies.
And we need to participate in the democratic process.
Absolutely. Vote, protest, even just talking to friends and family about this stuff. It all matters.
And support organizations that are fighting for the right things.
Yes.
For responsible innovation, for human rights.
Because technology is a powerful tool, but it's up to us to decide how it's used.
Okay, so stay informed, be critical, take action. But there's one more thing I want to emphasize.
Yeah.
And that's human connection.
Ah, yes. In all this talk about technology, it's easy to forget about that.
But it's our connections with each other that really matter.
They do.
They give our lives meaning.
Especially now, when technology is becoming so dominant.
It's our humanity that sets us apart.
Our empathy, our compassion.
And we need to hold on to that.
We do.
Because in the end, it's not about the technology itself.
It's about how we use it.
To create a better world.
A more just world, a more humane world.
Well said. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the economic side of all this. Both China and the U.S. see technology as key to economic growth.
Well, right.
But they're taking different approaches.
They are.
China seems really focused on building up its own tech giants.
Yeah, creating this self-sufficient digital ecosystem. They're investing a ton in AI, 5G, quantum computing.
And using their massive domestic market to give their own companies an advantage.
Exactly. They want to set their own rules for the digital economy.
Now, the U.S. has always been the leader in tech innovation.
All right.
But there's a worry that we're falling behind.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of urgency here to stay ahead of the game.
Some people are saying we need to be more aggressive in protecting our intellectual property.
And in investing in our own manufacturing capabilities.
So it's a real competition.
Oh,
a competition for economic dominance in the digital age.
And the outcome is going to have a huge impact on everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about economics, geopolitics, but let's bring it back to the individual level again. How is all of this going to affect our daily lives?
Well, it already is. Technology is changing everything, right? How we communicate, how we get information, how we work, how we shop.
And it's only going to get faster.
Exactly. Like as AI gets more sophisticated, it's going to automate more and more jobs, which could displace a lot of workers.
There's also the risk of AI being used for bad things.
Right.
Like creating deepfakes, developing autonomous weapons, and as we rely more and more on technology.
We have to be careful about privacy, about security.
Yeah.
About losing that human connection.
So there are both benefits and risks, and it's up to us to make sure the benefits outweigh the risks.
Absolutely.
I need to talk about the ethics of all this.
Yeah.
And make sure our leaders are putting people first.
Yeah, technology should serve humanity.
Not the other way around.
Exactly.
Well said. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, but this is just, a snapshot of a much bigger story. This relationship between China and the U.S., it's constantly changing.
It is.
And technology is only going to become more important.
Absolutely.
So we need to stay informed, stay engaged.
Keep those conversations going.
Because the future isn't set in stone.
Yeah.
We all have a role to play in shaping it.
We do.
It really does feel like we're at this crossroads with these two powerful forces kind of pulling the world in different directions.
Yeah.
It's like we're seeing two completely different visions for the future, and they both have, huge implications for how our societies will work, how our economies will function, how our lives will play out.
It's a pivotal moment, and as we've been talking about, it's not a simple either situation. Each model has, its pluses and minuses, its trade-offs. Like you look at China, their focus on state control, on social harmony, it's led to some pretty impressive economic growth. Millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, and they've used technology to build incredible infrastructure, create a sense of stability.
But that stability comes at a cost, right? I mean, the lack of freedom, the surveillance, the crackdown on dissent.
Right. Those are serious downsides, and it makes you wonder about the long-term sustainability of their model. Can a society really thrive when individual liberty is so restricted? Can you have real innovation when people are afraid to speak their minds? These are questions China's going to have to face.
And then you look at the U.S. We value freedom, democracy. We've got our own problems, right? Inequality, political polarization, people losing trust in institutions, and big tech is adding another layer of complexity to all of that.
Yeah, the U.S. model has its flaws, no doubt about it. And the question is, can we fix those flaws? Can we adapt to the challenges of the 21st century without losing those core values of freedom and democracy? Can we harness the power of technology without sacrificing who we are?
So we've got these two models, each with its own, strengths and weaknesses, and they're both competing for global dominance. It's like a giant social experiment with the fate of billions of people hanging in the balance. But I keep coming back to this one question. What does it all mean for the average person? How do these big geopolitical shifts actually affect our daily lives?
That's the crucial question, because it's easy to get caught up in the abstract stuff, global power, technology. But ultimately, it's about how all of this is changing the world we live in, the opportunities we have, the choices we make.
So let's try to connect the dots a little. How might these different approaches actually play out in people's lives in China, in the US?
Well, in China, we could see, more of the same, maybe even an intensification of the trends we've already talked about. More surveillance, tighter control over information, that social credit system becoming even more pervasive.
So imagine a world where your every move is tracked, your every purchase is monitored, and your access to opportunities is determined by some algorithm. That's pretty scary stuff.
It is. And the technology for this kind of control, it's being developed all over the world. So even if you don't live in China, there's a chance your own government or corporations could start using it.
That's a sobering thought. And what about the US? What are some of the possible scenarios here?
Well, one possibility is that corporate power just keeps growing unchecked. Big tech companies having even more control over our data, our lives. Imagine a world where algorithms decide what news you see, what you buy, even who you vote for.
It's like we're trading one form of control for another. Instead of Big Brother, it's big tech.
Exactly. And the danger is that we get so used to it that we forget what it means to be free, to think for ourselves, to challenge the way things are.
So what's the alternative? Is there a way to embrace technology without giving up our values, our freedoms, our privacy?
I think there is. But it requires us to be aware, to be informed, to be active. We need to demand transparency, accountability from our governments, from these corporations. We need to support organizations that are fighting for the right things, for responsible innovation, for human rights.
So it's not about rejecting technology. It's about being mindful of how it's used.
Exactly.
And making sure it's used in a way that aligns with our values.
We need to be shaping the future, not letting it shape us.
I like that.
It's a call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play.
And that even in the face of all this, all these big forces, we still have the power to make a difference.
We do.
Well, we've covered a lot today, explored some pretty complex issues. But I hope our listeners are walking away with a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that we're all facing.
I hope so too.
As China and the US continue down these very different paths.
It's a critical moment in history.
It really is. And while the future is uncertain, one thing is for sure, it's going to be shaped by the choices we make.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, the future is not predetermined. It's something we create together.